Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name's Tilly and today I'm going to be talking you through my December wrap up. So I haven't quite decided the format that I'd like to do wrap-up videos yet, or what categories I'd like to track, so please bear with me while I figure this out. But in December I read a total of 6 books. In terms of book length, 4 of the books I read were between 350 and 400 pages. I read 1 book that was between 600 and 650 pages, and 1 book that was between 650 and 700 pages. In terms of genre, I read 3 fantasy books, 2 contemporary and 1 romance book. In terms of the age category, I read 4 books that were adults, 1 young adult and 1 middle grade. And then in terms of standalones versus series, it was really mixed this month, with 3 of the books being standalones and 3 of the books being from series. And then just lastly, in terms of representation, in terms of LGBTQ+ rep, 3 of the books I read didn't have any representation. 1 book it was present but it wasn't the main character, and 2 of the books I read had a main character who identified as being LGBTQ+. Then in terms of disability representation, we've got some really good stats this month. 2 of the books didn't have any representation, but 4 of the books did. So let's get on to talking about the books themselves. So the first book I read this month was a reread, and that was A Shadow in the Ember by Jennifer L. Armentrout. And I wanted to read this before I read A Light in the Flame, which is the next book in the series, and I will talk about that one later in the video. So on reread, unfortunately this book wasn't as good as I remember it. Question, do you guys change your Goodreads ratings if when you reread a book the rating is different the second time around? I don't know if I was swept away from the hype around From Blood and Ash, but yeah, this book wasn't as good as I remember it. But then thinking about it, I wasn't using the CawPile method when I first read this book, and when I reread it I ran it through CawPile, and that's when it got the lower rating. But I do feel that the second rating through CawPile was more accurate, so I'm happy to use that rating on my Goodreads. Yeah, so this one came out at 3.5 rating, which isn't a bad rating, but isn't as high as it was originally. So if you didn't know what A Shadow in the Ember was about, it is a prequel series set before the events of From Blood and Ash. I'll read the synopsis to you because, as you can tell, this is a very chunky book and is very hard for me to explain. Born shrouded in the veil of the primals, a maiden as the fates promised, Seraphina Mirel's future has never been hers. Chosen before birth to uphold the desperate deal her ancestor struck to save his people, Sarah must leave behind her life and offer herself to the primal of death as his consort. However, Sarah's real destiny is the most closely guarded secret in all of Lasagna. She's not the well-protected maiden, but an assassin with one mission, one target: make the primal of death fall in love, become his weakness, and then end him. If she fails, she dooms her kingdom to a slow demise at the hands of the rots. Sarah has always known what she is: chosen consort assassin, weapon. A spectre, never fully formed yet drenched in blood. A monster. Until the primal of death's unexpected words and deeds chase away the darkness gathering inside her, and his seductive touch ignites a passion she's never allowed herself to feel and cannot feel for him. But Sarah has never had a choice. Either way, her life is forfeit. It always has been, as she has been forever touched by life and death. Another thing I will say that I noticed when I reread this is, as I said, it is very chunky, but a lot of it is so unnecessary. I do still really love the characters within this series and the story itself, but yeah, there's so much unnecessary filler within that book, which is why I rated it lower the second time around. And then my second read in December is the second book in that series, which is A Light in the Flame. Doesn't it really bug you when they don't match series? I mean, look at this. I can't really tell you too much about the synopsis of this book, because as I said, it is the second in the series, but my thoughts are kind of the same. You can kind of see how chunky it is, and again, there's so much filler in this book that's so unnecessary. In my opinion, if this book had been shorter and more refined, it would be so much better. As I said, I do love the characters, but I do find that Niktos is a little bit of a knockoff Rhysand. I guess they are both very similar in terms of having sort of like knights, dark powers, and the same sort of aura. Also, I find sometimes I like Sarah, sometimes she annoys me. In a few of Jennifer L. Armentrout's books, I have found that she tends to make some of her characters a little bit too overpowered, and I did find that this was a theme within this book as well. But both books do tend to tackle certain themes with a lot of sensitivity, which is fantastic, but I definitely recommend looking at the trigger warnings before you pick up either of these books. My favourite characters in this series are definitely the Draken, particularly Nektas, Riva, and Jadis. But in the end, I did rate this 3.5 stars, which isn't a bad rating, but I think if it had been refined a little bit, it could have come out at a 4 or 5 star. My next book is Ghosts by Dolly Alderton, which was the book club pick for Booknest Book Club. So pretty much most of the people in Best Patreon had already read this book by the time I'd got to it and had absolutely loved it, so I had really high hopes. but I just didn't love it as much as other people did. How people described it to me, I thought I was going to be picking up a Georgia Nicholson book but for people in their 30s, and this just isn't that. So maybe I had too high expectations going into this book, and that's why I was disappointed. But it was very easy to read. I think we've probably all met a Max within our lifetime. I could relate a little bit to the fact that all of her friends are married and have kids, and she doesn't fit that stereotype. And despite the bits with her dad being very, very sad, I didn't find this book emotional in the slightest. So in terms of the synopsis of this one, if you want to give it a read, everything gets easier in your 30s, right? Though she has plenty to celebrate, successful career as a food writer, new home, loving friends and family, for Nina Dean, her 30s have not exactly been the liberating, uncomplicated experience she was sold. From fading friendships to exes popping the question, everyone is moving on, or worse, to the suburbs. And as her dad slowly loses his memories, her mum seems dead set on making new ones. Then she meets Max, who tells her on date 1 that he's going to marry her. But what seems like an exciting new development will ensure this year is Nina's strangest yet. I did rate this book 3 stars, so fairly middle of the road. It wasn't a bad book, but it didn't blow me away. Then we move on to Percy Jackson and the Olympians, and the first book within that series, which is The Lightning Thief. I feel like I'm literally the only person in the world who hasn't read this series, but if you don't know what this book is about, the synopsis says, Percy Jackson is about to be kicked out of boarding school, again, and that's the least of his troubles. Lately, mythological monsters and the gods of Mount Olympus seem to be walking straight out of the pages of Percy's Greek mythology textbook and into his life, and worse, he's angered a few of them. Zeus's master lightning bolt has been stolen, and Percy is the prime suspect. Now, Percy and his friends have just 10 days to find and return Zeus's stolen property and bring peace to a warring Mount Olympus. But to succeed in his quest, Percy will have to do more than catch the true thief. He must come to terms with the father who abandoned him, solve the riddle of the oracle, which warns him of betrayal by a friend, and unravel a treachery more powerful than the gods themselves. So I read this book as part of Ro's Patreon readathon, and I absolutely love this book. The writing style is just so easy to follow along. It's so exciting. I love all the Greek mythology elements within this. It's also very different from the films. I rewatched Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief movie after reading this book, and it annoyed me so much how much they changed. But it makes me really excited about the Percy Jackson TV shows, which will hopefully align more to the book. But yeah, I love this book. I gave it 4 stars, and I can't wait to read the next one. Then we move on to the Christmassy reads, starting with Make You Mine This Christmas by Lizzie Huxley Jones. Now, I absolutely adored this book. It was so lovely and wholesome, and it was exactly what I wanted to read around that Christmassy time. It's so funny in places. I love all of the characters, particularly Kit and Ambrose. This actually came in an Illumicrate Afterlight box, and I've actually been really impressed by the books I've read from Illumicrate so far. Just to give you an overview as to what this book is about, it's the golden rule of pretending to be someone's girlfriend. Don't fall for their sister. After a year from hell, Haf is ready to blow off steam at a Christmas party. A kind stranger, a few too many drinks, and suddenly she's kissing Christopher under the mistletoe in front of his ex-girlfriend. The next day, the news is out that they're apparently a couple madly in love and coming to Oxley to spend the festive season with Christopher's family. But Haf doesn't have better holiday plans, and to save her new friend from embarrassment, she agrees to pretend to be Christopher's girlfriend for Christmas. It has the makings of a hilarious anecdote they'll be telling for years, until Haf meets Christopher's sister, the mysterious, magnetic, and utterly irresistible Kit. Maybe love was waiting for Haf in this quiet little town all along. I don't really know what else to say about this book other than it's a lovely, cute Christmas read. There's some great representation. There's obviously sapphic representation, there's non-binary representation, a bit of autism representation. Kit herself is also disabled. There's just so much great representation going on within this book, and I just loved it so much that this came out as 4 stars for me. And then lastly, we've got Stay Another Day by Juno Dawson, which is a completely different read. So to bring you up to speed on what this one's about, the McAllister house on Arbitrum Road has seen 120 Christmases since its completion. This year, Fern is bringing her gorgeous boyfriend home, and she wants everything to be perfect, but her twin brother Rowan would rather go on the pool than pull crackers with the family, and their younger sister Willow is terrified of Christmas Day. With only 4 sleeps till Christmas, 3 secretive siblings, 2 hot house guests, and 1 juicy secret, this Christmas there'll be some big surprises under the tree. This was so dramatic. There was so many twists and turns, so much going on, that it was just so interesting to read and very captivating. Again, there's lots of representation within this book. There's LGBTQ+ representation, including non-binary. There's also eating disorder representation, OCD representation. Just make sure you read the trigger warnings before you give this book a read. But I thoroughly loved this book. I gave it 4 stars, and I think just captivating is just the best way to sum this book up. So there you have it, all of the books I read during December. What did you read during December? What was your favourite book? Leave me a comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe to see more of my content. I'll see you in my my next one. Bye guys.